following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco and across the moat from Oakland. I am a podcaster who talks to some of the most interesting people on the planet, and today is no exception. I have a Renaissance man, a former coach, a public speaker, and an all-around interesting guy. I'd like to introduce Mark Potter. How are you, sir?
Doing great this morning. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, it's a pleasure. You're from Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. Am I correct?
That is correct, yeah. Wife and I live just outside of Wichita, and basically I was the head basketball coach in the Wichita, Kansas area for 30 years. So I've been here pretty much, I've been in Kansas all my life, in the Wichita area for over 30 years.
Okay. Got to start with the weather. Midwest weather in the United States this winter has been brutal. I'm sure you guys are no exception.
No, it's today, I don't know, it's something like 25 degrees out, and yesterday it was almost golfing weather. It actually was for Kansas. It was about 55 degrees yesterday, and then today it's 25, and it's going to be this way for another couple of weeks, I understand. So it's part of what we have to put up with out here in the Midwest. Not something that we always like, but it is what it is, you know?
Oh, I know. That's how life is, huh?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
It is what it is. That's a great expression. Tell me about your basketball passion. You became a coach. How did you, what fueled your passion for basketball? Was it?
Well, I grew up, I grew up in a sports family. Believe it or not, it was my grandmother that really was the first one that I think was the most interested in sports, and that's not a lot of people I think would say their grandmother is the one that really was the most competitive one in the family. But I can remember going to my grandmother's house and watching the Kansas City Chiefs, and back in in the Midwest, that's who we watch down here. But we used to compete real young in baseball, basketball, and football. I played all three sports in high school, and played under a legendary high school coach by the name of Les Davis, and come from a really small community in Kansas. So my head coach was the same in all three sports. So that'll give you a little bit of old school right there, right? I'm 55.
For sure. What was your skill set? Were you a guard, forward?
I was a shooting guard. Yeah, I was a shooting guard, and my greatest skill was shooting the basketball, and so I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go on and play 4 years of college basketball and baseball. Baseball this is what a lot of people don't know about me, is that it was my favorite sport, and I was probably actually a little better player in baseball than I was in basketball. Like I said, I played both sports in college, and had the opportunity to play about another, 15 or 16 years after that, as far as what's called the National Baseball Congress, and played a lot of semi-pro baseball for many years after that. Just loved the game, and always have been a competitor at the highest level. So it's why I got into coaching, and wanted to be able to teach the great game of basketball, through the life skills through the great game of basketball, and so for 30 years I had that opportunity. I was fortunate enough to get a head coaching job and a teaching job in a little town outside of Wichita called Cheney, Kansas, and that's where I got my start, and was fortunate enough to be a head coach for 30 years after that. And basically it was at three different levels: at the high school level as a coach, and then I went and back to my alma mater and actually restarted the men's basketball program there, and was the head coach there for 19 years. And when I got there, we were NAIA, and then about 9 years in, we made the full transition to NCAA Division II, and so I was basically both NAIA and NCAA Division II coach at the college level at the same school, which is Newman University, where I went to school.
Well, I can tell you're a public speaker. You have no trouble communicating.
Thank you.
That's for darn sure. Let me just touch on this two skills, playing basketball, playing baseball. How does it help a basketball player to play baseball, and how does it help a baseball player to play basketball?
Yeah, well, the hand-eye coordination is obviously a pretty important thing. So, some of that's God-given, and obviously a lot of it is a lot of skill work through the years to try to get to to be at the best of your ability when you get to that level. But, both of them are team games, and sometimes baseball, when people think of baseball, well, it's a lot slower, and I think it does teach you a lot more patience and being able to handle adversity a little bit better than even basketball from the standpoint of, if things don't go well one day and you don't get, a couple of hits or whatever, you got to wait, turn around and wait again, play the next day. Whereas in basketball, you can have a bad game shooting it, but you can rebound it, you can defend it, you can really execute the other phases of the game. And not that you can't defend in baseball, but sometimes you don't get opportunities to defend depending on what your position is. So that's why the patience has to come in. And so it's just two different sports at the same time. They're, you're on a team. You got to understand that you have teammates, and you got to be able to, figure out how to get along with your teammates one way or the other. Two different sports, but the same thing applies when it comes to team when it's all said and done.
Okay. Are you ever sorry that you didn't choose baseball over basketball in terms of your coaching?
Great question, and I've had that question asked quite a bit, and the answer is no. I had, and you can probably hear it through my voice, but my personality just from a coaching perspective really fits basketball a little bit better. A little more intense game, and, it's obviously a faster game, and my personality for whatever reason, it just, the game of basketball, it just fit my personality a little bit better. And I did do some assistant baseball coaching when I was at the high school level way back when I first started. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed it. But that adrenaline flow is a lot different when you're coaching baseball than it is basketball. And I don't know, I just needed that adrenaline flow all the time, I guess. And, sometimes your greatest strength, your passion for something is also your greatest weakness. And we can maybe talk about that as we get into the podcast this morning. But, that adrenaline flow probably got me in trouble through the years as I went, as I continued to coach through the years. So baseball might have been a better sport for me when it was all said and done. But no, there's really no regret whatsoever. I love basketball, and I love being able to, just feed off of that adrenaline flow and the fast pace of how the game goes. I enjoyed that a lot more than I did baseball as a coach. Now, as a player, totally, I could handle being patient and understanding, all I cared about was give me a chance to get 4 at-bats today, and let's defend it, and let's do, there was nothing like stepping in the box and playing a game and being able to hit. So two different sports, yet at the same time, no regrets as far as the path that I end up choosing.
Okay. You're a jock. How about that? That's the highest compliment I can. That's the highest compliment I could pay in my life.
That's right.
I love sports. I'm thrilled to be able to talk to you about your experience. I want you to lead this podcast and take it away, so I'm only going to ask one more question. And, boy, that question just slipped right out of my head. But it was a good one, I promise you that. Here it is. Which coach had the biggest effect on you, not from afar when you were growing up? Which basketball coach? We were fortunate. As I look at you, you're a middle-aged guy. John Wooden comes to mind. Coach K. Whole bunch of folks that may have influenced you. Who is the one that did the most job on your head?
Yeah, that's an incredible question. When it is from afar.
Well, one was a great question, and this is incredible. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. I peaked at, in my life, that was an all right question. So this is a big day for me.
I'm not really sure I had, obviously John Wooden, was a man that I think touched so many different people. Obviously, he was incredibly successful. But, one of the things when you study who John Wooden was, he was an incredible man, and his character and integrity was at another level. And, when he was, way back when he was coaching at UCLA and winning all those championships, it's really interesting to hear all the stories that many of his players talk about in regards to the high character and integrity that he taught day in and day out, all the way from how to tie your shoes, which is, you don't think that's character nowadays, but, that's a totally different day and age. But that being said, you can take all of the things that a man like, Coach Wooden was teaching, the things that he was teaching, you can take all those things and you can apply it to today's athletes as well. And, because what we are missing a lot more today than we ever used to be is the discipline that really takes to be, true basketball players, true athletes, true, human beings as far as details. And when I say all the way back to, he'd tell them how to put their socks on, what those socks needed to look like, and making sure that they all look the same. This day and age, people think I'm crazy when I make that statement. And, it's just something to be said, and you can tell I'm probably a little conservative when it comes to those types of things. But there's just something to be said, especially about team, whether it's, basketball, baseball, or whether it's a business. There's just something to be said about, being on the same page and understanding that there are other people here, and, it's not all about me. It's also about the rest of the players on this basketball team or this business as well. So I think those are things that are just so valuable that I think we a lot of times forget as we go forward in life. And it was one of the main things that I really truly tried to coach, for 30 years was the relationship, trying to figure out who our guys were and what that was all about, trying to figure out the right buttons to push, and going back to, and I don't know that John Wooden was not, there's a lot of different coaches I could talk about, but he's the one that I want to talk about as far as integrity and character and how he handled his business. And so, a lot of fun for me. And then the personal part of it was, you learn from who's coaching you as well. And obviously, my high school coach in the state of Kansas is, did a lot of things for me personally. And then obviously my other coaches that I went to college, I had, baseball coaches and basketball coaches that really, meant a lot to me as far as, what I was taught, the discipline that it really takes to be the kind of player that you need to be, and the kind of, have the kind of competitiveness that you need to be when you get in the real world. So those two things really relate, when it comes to getting out there to the real world. So there you go. And I guess the short answer of that is you already brought his name up, but I would have probably had to go there anyway. So there you go with that question.
Glad I picked the right coach.
Great question, Zig.
That's terrific. Mark, did you have a favorite pro team growing up? Anybody that you idolized?
Yeah, when I was young, the Kansas City Kings had a basketball team. That'll tell you what my age is, and I'll never forget.
You're an old guy.
Yeah, I'm an old guy.
When I was young, they were playing in Rochester.
Well, there you go.
I'm serious. I remember hearing. Basically they were playing in Cincinnati when I was young, but I do remember hearing the Rochester Royals and reading about that, my old NBA guides and what have you. But,
yeah, absolutely. But no, I remember I was in middle school back in the mid '70s, and my mom and dad and my grandmother again took us up to Municipal Stadium Municipal Arena up there in Kansas City, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was playing, and they were playing against the Lakers, and I remember a guy by the name of Sam Lacey playing for the Kings, who every shot he took he would kiss it off the backboard, whether he was 18 feet and in, he'd kiss it off the backboard. Nobody does that kind of thing anymore. And people are like, oh man, that's
the guy
old
famous
school,
for that, if you remember, was Sam Jones.
Yep, that's right.
And
that's right.
The old expression was, "You can bank on it," and
that's exactly
you're absolutely right. Nobody uses the backboard. That was going to be my next question. If I didn't let you take it yourself, but maybe you won't mind if I lead you into it. What are the biggest changes, not only in the game, in the individual that you're coaching over the last, say, 30 years?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen has to do with players that, and players do work at it today. It's not like they don't work at it, any differently, I think, than back in the day. But players, and I don't mean this to come across the wrong way, but they're just a lot more selfish in this day and age than they used to be. And what I mean by that is this: when you play a lot of basketball, a lot of the AAU part of it, and all the things that go with recruitment with these guys, in some ways you have to be selfish. So that's not necessarily a negative statement. But what ends up happening is guys don't learn how to really give the ball up on time. They feel like they've got to prove, to all the scouts that are sitting in the stands and all the coaches that are sitting in the stands, they feel like they've got to prove to them that, they're a really good player. And like I said, there's some truth to that. But what most players don't understand is that every coach can see whether you have the ability to be unselfish and be a team player versus being a guy that would be what we would consider selfish. And it's a lot harder to watch basketball in this day and age than it used to be from that standpoint. But, players are bigger, faster, stronger today. So obviously, there's a lot more one-on-one, and there's a lot of things that have changed through the years. And then the other thing that's a negative thing is that players, and again, I apologize, I'm going to sound a little bit of old school today, but players they do feel a little more entitled in this day and age, and not really sure why exactly. I mean, it's just the times have changed, and like I said, with the recruitment the way it is, there's some reasons. As coaches, we've probably created some of that. So I'm not putting that all on the kids. I think our society maybe sometimes creates some of that type of thing as well. But that was a little different for me, as I got, this is my second year out of coaching, and just the ability to get kids to really be unselfish and give the basketball up on time became a little more of a challenge as we got, in the latter years of my coaching. But that being said, we still have great players and great kids for the most part. It's a lot of things changed, though, through the years, and one of them is, players feel like that, if they walk away from a game and they didn't score X amount of points, that they didn't play a great game. And as we all know, there's 4 phases of the game of basketball, and if you can defend it and rebound it and do the other things well, you can really help your basketball team win. But unfortunately, players think way too much about scoring it versus doing all the other little detailed things that are really going to make the difference in winning basketball games. So obviously you got to score it too, but being unselfish and giving it up on time, it's amazing how the chemistry looks on the floor, and what it feels like when players are completely unselfish and they're not worried about their own statistics.
Well, great answer. Mark, you're 2 years out. What do you miss about it, and what don't you miss about it?
Yeah, I mean, people ask that question a lot as well, and they ask me, Coach, are you going to get back in it? And the game plan right now is for me to public speak and continue to hammer this new chapter in my life. But what I miss about the game is the true relationship with the players, and the camaraderie with the other coaches that you have and you build through 30 years of being a head coach. And I really do miss that. That's a part that's very near and dear to my heart. That being said, there's just so many battles, and I don't care if it's at where I coached or whether it's at the highest level, at the Division I level, or whether it's the high school level. I got to go there, but parents are different today than they used to be. When I first started coaching, it wasn't like I still didn't have parent issues at times, but people feel like they can just make assessments and do things today in this day and age they didn't used to do, and so I don't miss any of that. Like, I don't miss all the dealings with people that feel like that we're mistreating their children. And when I say mistreat, I don't mean from a emotional or physical or anything like that. I'm talking about just from playing time. That always befuddled me. Like, sometimes a relationship with a player, and that's why you have to work so hard to get players' trust. Is that it's based upon, well, if they play as many minutes as they want, then everything's fine. But if they don't play as many minutes as they want, there creates this wall between you and the player sometimes. And so it's always, just being transparent with them and being real with them and being 100%, trustworthy. Sometimes they don't always want to hear what you have to say, but the players at the end of the day want to hear the truth. And every now and then they may not want to hear it, but they can live. Let's put it this way: they can live with the truth a lot better than they can if you're not being upfront with them and telling them exactly kind of what you're thinking as well. So I do think it's really important. The communication lines between a coach and a player has to be better today than it did when I first started coaching 30 years ago, because they have this expectation of knowing and understanding, they want to know what's getting ready to happen for the most part. And you can't always predict it, but, just the communication lines between the players is really important. But I don't miss, just the battles of, budgets and all the things that go with, every university has issues. But, if you're not in the top 50 in the nation, pretty much every university in the nation has a problem with the finances in one way or another. So there's so many other battles that people don't understand that just drive you crazy through the years. And, after 30 years of it, it was just time for me to make a move and get out and really, like I said, just start this new chapter in my life as far as trying to impact people in a different way and hopefully impact a lot more people in that process as well.
Okay, we're going to talk about the new chapter of your life, but I want you to be Notre Damus first. We've touched on the game as it used to be. We touched on the game as it is now. How do you think the game is going to evolve 10, 20 years from now?
Wow. I mean, it's, and I still love the NBA and still watch the NBA. And I tell you what, there's some teams that are so much fun to watch. But again, the game has just evolved so much with the ball screen. And I did too. I mean, that's, I went to that as well. I mean, things that players grow up with, you got to continue to build upon, obviously. But it's a lot more difficult to watch today. That being said, when you have great athletes that are playing the game as we do now, I mean, just like I said, they're bigger, stronger, and faster. And you're going to see a lot more one-on-one and a lot more ball screen type action so players can make plays. And I don't think that part's it's obviously going to stay the same. But there's always things that do change as you go forward. And the one thing that I always hope is that you can continue to see, your teams like, and maybe I'm overstepping a boundary with you guys in your area out there, but so Golden State, is a fun team to watch because they play unselfish for the most part, and they give the ball up on time. And then there's times when, I don't care what team you're going to watch, you're like, okay, they're not that unselfish, right? But I do think that there are still teams out there that are extremely successful doing it the right way, and those are the type of teams that I really enjoy watching. The San Antonio Spurs come to mind as well. But that's why I guess I love college basketball a lot more, because I just think the game is played at, it's much more pure at the college basketball level for the most part. You still see
the one and out deal in college basketball, not where you are, but in big time college basketball, not taking anything away from your level.
No, I get it.
Does that disturb you a great deal? Because part of being a college basketball fan, I grew up in New York. We had the NITs, Holiday Festival. We had it great, but we got to see these guys come together as a team over 3-4 years, and I miss that.
Yes. Well, yes, it does bother me. I'm not gonna lie about that, because it's, when you look at, the Dukes and Kentuckys and KUs of the world, the big time programs, they're going to have sometimes 3 and 4 and 5 players that are one and done, and so you do miss what we've really been talking about. That chemistry thing is just you're not capable of getting to the level of having the kind of chemistry that you need. And so what they do is they win on pure talent. And don't get me wrong, these coaches are incredible. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but they're winning because they're incredibly talented. And you see them as they go forward, like I think you've kind of seen it this year with Kentucky a little bit. And almost every year, Coach Calipari's teams, they, in the beginning of the year, you're like, okay, they're a bunch of talented players, but they're not very, they're not team-oriented. Well, as the year goes along, you see how they progress. And that's so much fun to watch. But, next year's going to be a completely different year, and it'll start over again. And you don't see the four-year players near like you used to be. And because of that, I think, we pay the price as fans a little bit when you're watching the game and you're not seeing quite the pure basketball that maybe we used to see.
No question. Have at it, sir. Tell us a little bit about your life, your rocky road, as it were. You wouldn't think that people from the Midwest had rocky roads, really and truthfully.
Yeah.
But they do, such is life. Would you tell us your life story and how I found you? Because you're one of those people who could overcome life's adversity, and I really admire that. And if you tell your life story to my audience, they will too.
Well, thank you. And I, after, you had asked me to come on your podcast, I saw one of your posts, and my heart just completely goes out to the family that lost their son. I saw you post that on there.
My good friends Patrick and Julia Tracy, Alameda,
my
California.
heart just goes out.
Their son took his own life, and they are handling it with class and dignity. They are not covering up. They will never refuse to be honest about his ending, and they continue to love him, and it's
Absolutely.
Unbelievably sad.
Yeah.
I raised a child, and we called him the boy, capital T, capital B, and that's how they called their son, the boy.
Yeah.
And I'd read their postings over the year, the boy this, the boy that, and I always smiled at that because Philip was the boy.
Yeah.
And I woke up the other morning, my son's mother said, "Do you know Austin Tracy?" And I didn't even know him as Austin. I knew him as the boy. And she told me what happened, and she had read it on Facebook before I was even up. And it was absolutely devastating to me.
Well, I bring that up not to, kind of to make not light of it, but to talk about that very openly and honestly, because when you ask me my life story, I have a story that, basically I've gone public with for the last 14 years, and that is a story of, as a head college basketball coach, I went through severe depression and ended up having to, miss 8 games and 28 practices that season. And that's been 14 years ago. And so I tell you that from this perspective. Most people, when they see, whether it be a high school head coach or a college head coach, no matter what the level is, and then they see, I have, a wonderful wife, and, we have 2 children that are just, very near and dear to our hearts as well. We have a son named Zach who played 5 years of professional golf and made it to the PGA Tour and played on at least one event and played on the web.com.
Wow.
And I don't tell you that because to brag, but I just tell you that because and our daughter she's an angel to us. And I mean, they're really important. And so when I tell you that, most people, when they look at me, they see me as and my family as a family that's got everything going for us. And I guess I want to say loud and clear that all families have issues, and and I love social media, so I don't want to be negative about social media, but so many people get the wrong idea when you see pictures posted and all of the great things that you see. That's we're all going to post, for the most part, good pictures of our family and that type of thing. But we get the wrong idea. You get the wrong picture of what real life is about. We all have issues. We're all broken people. We're all, we're all people that struggle in life.
We're all
no
damaged. We're all damaged by life. That's just the nature of the beast.
That's right. And so I tell you all that to tell you this. When I went through severe depression as a head basketball coach, and now when I speak on this very topic, my wife and I, we have titled it The Silent Epidemic. And the reason that we titled it that is because, I am the first one that's, I'm guilty of the silent epidemic, meaning, I had all of these issues going on in my mind. And, it was in the beginning of the season, so I'm trying to get my team ready for the season, and I just didn't feel the same as I always had. And I had always been very stressed out during seasons. I mean, it was just the way I was. But this time it was different. I lost about 30 pounds in a 5-week period. I had spiraling thought. My thoughts were spiraling out of control. All the way from, my wife, I started calling my wife when I was in 7th grade. So we grew up in the real same small town in Kansas, in Sedan, Kansas. And so she, I've been with my wife for a long time. We've been married for 34 years, but I started calling her when I was in 7th grade. So she'd known me for a lot of years. She'd seen me cry one time in all of those years. And when I started to go through severe depression, she would see me sitting in my chair, and I'd have tears rolling down my face, and really didn't even know why. That's a chemical imbalance in the brain is what it is. And at the time, I didn't know why either. I didn't understand what that even looked like. I just knew that I didn't feel right. And so my wife also was a part of that silent epidemic because she was in denial that, okay, you know what, my husband, there's something wrong with him, and maybe we need to get him to the doctor. She just knew it was part of the season, and, I've always been stressed out. She's like, you know what, he got up and went to work today, so I think maybe he'll be better today. And that's kind of the thought process that I think a lot of us have when it comes to some type of mental issue. And it doesn't have to necessarily be severe depression and anxiety. It can be all kinds of, different things. And so to continue the story,
Mark, did you seek help right away? Or
no,
if at all?
No, I did not. I describe it like this. It was a 5-week stretch. So we started practice on October the 1st. And from October the 1st until about November the 4th is how long it took. So about 4.5 to 5 weeks is how long it took me to spiral completely out of control. Well, the last 2 weeks of that, that's when my wife would see me crying, and I didn't discuss it. I didn't tell her how I felt at all. I was just saying, something's not right, and then I would just drop it, and I would try to move on, and I would try to, show that toughness that I felt like every man and every husband and every father and every head coach needs to have. And unfortunately, I couldn't find it within me to have that same type of, toughness, or whatever word you want to use to describe what maybe society thinks we're supposed to be. And so, no, I didn't seek help, and my wife continued to kind of see me spiral out of control. And finally, after one really difficult day where I was standing at my sink and I just, had tears running down my face, and I have to make sure your audience hears this next statement. But I had suicidal thoughts as well, and that's the people that are going to listen to this don't know me that well, but most people, well, every person that ever knew me would know beyond a shadow of a doubt. There's no way Coach Potter's had that type of thoughts, and it's just not true. So when there's a chemical imbalance and the serotonin level starts to drop in the brain, I don't care who we are, we can all have that type of thought process, and if it isn't addressed, that's why we have such a high suicide rate now in our society. And that's why I'm so passionate about speaking about this very openly and honestly. And that's why I go to, I've been to California like 6 different times, speaking to a lot of different junior colleges out there. I kind of got my foot in the door with the junior college system out there, but it's not just California, it's Kansas, it's you name it, it's everywhere we go. And I think that's the thing that people don't understand is that I don't care what kind of family we're from or what kind of background or culture, there are issues everywhere we go. So to finish the story, my wife finally after a really difficult day, she realized, okay, this is another level, and she got on the phone and she got the doctor's appointment, and so we were literally the day before the season was getting ready to start, and I was sitting in my chair. My wife came to me and she said, I've got a doctor's appointment. We're going to go see the doctor today. And I'm just describing.
She took the initiative. That's beautiful.
It is
probably
beautiful.
Saved your life.
She did save my life. There's no question about that. And this, after describing all of the pain that I was going through, my answer to my wife when she said she got a doctor's appointment, I said, I'm not going and you can't make me. Now that's insanity right there. And my wife says, well, let's put it this way. My wife's got a little bit of spunk. She'd have to live with me, right? But she says, oh, you're going to the doctor. And she basically said, if I need to go get your, 6'7" or 8, assistant coach who weighed about 280 pounds to come over here and pick you up, put you in your car, that's what we're going to do,
Yeah,
so
you were a shooting guard, so I'm just assuming you weren't 6'8".
No, I'm 6'3", about 195. So
okay.
he would have had no problem probably getting me in the car. And my wife always describes it like this. She said I knew a lot of big guys because of my, obviously because of my job. So she said if I needed to call 5 of them, that's what I was going to do.
And I'm sure they would have helped you. They would have been there.
Yeah, no question about it. And so, needless to say, I got in the car that day and we went to the doctor, and basically they said, Coach, you're going to have to take a little bit of time off until you get better here. So they put me on antidepressants. I know that I want to make a statement about that before I move on. Is a lot of people are fearful of getting on medication, and I am not a doctor, so I don't want this to sound as if I am. But medication saved my life. When there is a chemical imbalance in the brain, there's 2 things that can help. One is the medication and one is counseling. And so normally it's a combination of both that get people out of the depths of severe depression. And so I went to a counselor once a week for 5 weeks while I was at home. The doctor said, Coach, you're going to have to stay home for a while. We're going to check you out once a week. And, we'll let you know when you can go back to your team. And so a part of that silent epidemic that I talked about earlier was I didn't want anybody to know why I wasn't with my team. And so I didn't tell anybody. And of course, my wife was dealing with the media calling and dealing with players that were calling, and she had a lot of pressure on her during that time. But, I was at home for 3 weeks, and literally this was how bad it was. I sit in my chair at home, and I didn't watch television. I didn't read the paper. I did nothing but sleep and sit in my chair. That's how far gone I was. And finally the medication started to kick in, and this is the part of the story that I definitely want to be able to tell today, and that is I felt a little bit better, and so I got up and I went in to check my emails for the first time in a long time. And I opened up that email, and one email just jumped out at me, and it was from the sports writer at the Wichita Eagle, which is, Wichita, Kansas, for the people out there that don't know. There's about almost 500,000 people in Wichita, so it's a decent-sized city. There's about 1 million in the metropolitan area, give or take. And so the Wichita Eagle covers all of those people.
Right.
And this sports writer covered our team, and he just said in the email, he said, hey, Coach Potter, he said, when you get back with your team, I would like to be the first to interview you and, basically find out why you haven't been with your team. And again, part of the silent epidemic was I'm not talking to him or anybody else, and that's really what I did. I replied to him, and I said, I'm not talking to you or anybody else, and I sent the email. And, probably I always say this, but I was probably healthy enough to start to check my emails. I'm not sure I was quite ready to start replying to my emails yet.
Right.
But it stayed that way for the next, 2 weeks, and then finally, I got better daily. The medication really started to kick in. And then finally the doctors released me to go back to work. And it was a short time after I went back with my team that I decided, maybe I do need to talk to other people a little bit about what I just went through. And so to make a short story long, I guess, I called that sports writer up and I said, hey, you come in on such and such date and I'll tell you everything. And that's what I did. And Zig, that's when my life changed. It was, I told him everything. Everything I'm talking to you about openly today on this podcast, I told that sports writer that day. And it changed my life because literally I just got inundated with, I always estimate this, but in about 48-hour time period after that article came out, I estimate I either got called or emailed by over 400 people, over half of which I didn't even know. And so that changed my life already, knowing that, you know what, just by opening up a little bit and talking about something that's a taboo subject, this is how many people out there, that were touched by it. And obviously there were probably, many, many more that, weren't going to pick up the phone or email me. And so at that point in time, that obviously raised my eyebrows. And I'll never forget in that interview with that sports writer, his name's Jeffrey Parson. I asked him, I said, why are you so interested in this? Because he interviewed for almost 2 hours. And he said, Coach, I have a very close family member that if they just read your article, maybe they'll start taking medication and they'll get better too, Coach. And so then I understood that there's just so many people that are affected by, some type of mental illness. And, I'm at my home today as I'm speaking to you, and on my desk where I work from now is a letter that I received about, it was about a week and a half after that article came out. It was from a 17-year-old boy from a high school just outside of Wichita. And that 17-year-old boy said in this letter, he said, Coach Potter, I don't know who you are. He said this. He said, Coach Potter, you don't know who I am, but he said, I read your article. And he said, I could relate to almost all the symptoms that you had. And he said, I couldn't tell my mom and dad about what I was going through. And he said, after one really difficult night, he said, I had to tell my mom and dad. And he said, they took me to the doctor, and I'm on medication. I'm going to therapy. And he said, I'm starting to get a lot better. He said, I just want you to know, thanks for saving my life, Coach.
Oh, wow.
Well, that letter sits on my desk, and it did for, all those years that I coached at Newman after that. It sat on my desk to remind me of the job that not only I have to do, but we have as a society to do to break the stigma that's involved with mental illness. Because just like me, I wasn't going to tell anybody. So the silent epidemic I was a huge part of. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to change that mindset and that stigma that's attached to mental illness so that I don't see you posting, from those parents. It's just heartbreaking to see those types of things. And in many cases, I believe that if people understood what they had to do, we could save a lot of lives. And just as importantly, it's not always the people that are taking their lives. Obviously, that's a really horrible thing, and that's number one reason I probably decided to do it. But it's all of the people that are suffering in silence. And I can tell you I suffered in silence for many years before, ever getting help. Why? Because, again, our society tells us, whether it be men, and of course now females, the suicide rate for females are going up as well. But for men, it's even higher. And it's because of that, mindset that, people tell us. And, I'm old school. I came from a family that, you don't talk about your feelings like that. Like, suck it up, get through it, and you know what? Count your blessings. And when you have a chemical imbalance in your brain, you can't do any of that. You try your hardest, but you're not capable until you go get help. And so that's my number one priority is, like my wife did, she didn't take no for an answer. So, I want to be the same way as I go out and I speak. I don't want to take no for an answer. I want people to understand and recognize that, it's okay. And most importantly, there is strength in taking the first step to get help, because if we're not the best version of ourselves every day, then if we just take that step to go get help, and you may not be in severe depression, but if we're not our best version of ourselves and we know it, man, let's start changing that mindset of saying, you know what, I can go reach out for help, and understanding that there's strength in that, because you're going to be the best version of yourself once you do get the help. And sometimes it is as easy as, taking medication. I've been on medication for 14 years. Very proud to tell you that. And a lot of people, man, that scares people when, and I wouldn't expect people necessarily to go into public like I do, weekly.
No, it would scare me if you had your symptoms and weren't on medication, not that you are on medication, for yourself, really.
Yeah, that's right.
Before I forget, and we are coming, just time has got us. My God, first I want to invite you back to continue this. But I want to give the number for suicide prevention. It's 1-800-273-TALK. And I'm going to repeat it. That's 1-800-273-TALK. Sometimes that first acceptance doesn't come for a long, of one's problems, doesn't come for a long time. And, I mean, if anybody has any doubts about ending it, I happen to be Jewish, culturally Jewish, not religious, culturally. And there's a letter of the Hebrew alphabet entitled Chai, life. And that's a big thing with Jews. To life, l'chaim, 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 to life. It really is an acceptance that we're pretty much, we're pragmatists, at least I am. You only go around the track once, and you don't even go around the track, you go down the track. Yeah. So that's the certainty of it. We have at least one. I don't want to throw anybody's faith into a tither, but if you woke up this morning and Trump is still president, you got to test your faith. I don't know what to tell you. I got to be me. And if that doesn't cause you to want to call 1-800-273-TALK, in any event, please, if you're out there, when you were sitting in that couch and tears running down your eyes, you didn't envision getting better and having the good things back in your life, whatever they are. And I'm speaking, I don't know what the good things are for you, your children, obviously, your wife. What is her name? She's loving.
My wife's name is Nanette, and she's
Nanette, like in Nanette Fabre.
Yeah, Nanette, Nanette.
Yeah, that's it. There was an actress when I was a kid, Nanette Fabre, a very classy woman, and your wife is just that. She got to the bottom of it. You needed help, and she got you help, and
no question. I want to say this one last thing if we got to go, but it feels really good to feel good, and that doesn't mean we still don't have the normal daily issues that we all have to go through. But when your chemical imbalance is fixed, when the serotonin level is where it needs to be in the brain, you can deal with the everyday problems a lot easier. And ultimately, our goal is to obviously let people know it's okay to take the first step, and also to reiterate what my wife did, and that was to not take no for an answer. Find a way to take that first step and set up the appointment and just simply do what the doctors tell you to do.
Wow. You're so succinct. Next time you're on, we're going to talk about your public speaking, and the message is, plural, that you try to give people listening. And what a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And our website, d2up.org. It stands for Dedicated to Uncommon Principles, and it's d2up.org. And again, my name's Mark Potter, so they can probably look that up under Coach Mark Potter and find all the information that they need. We're blessed to be able to have the opportunity to impact others, and I'm so appreciative that you had me on. Zig. So thank you
Well,
so much.
I so appreciate it that you decided to come on. You were a tremendous guest, and more than that, you brought a tear to my eye because
thank you.
I'm so happy for your recovery, and I'm so happy for the work you did. You are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being my guest. I'm Ralph Tycho. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I hope you were comfortably zoned, and we'll come back and listen another time. I'll be back. Adios. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.